The letter slipped from behind the old wooden cabinet and landed softly on the floor, as if it had been waiting for that exact moment. Maria froze. At 75, her movements were slow and careful, shaped by years of routine and quiet living. She hadn't expected anything to fall. The cabinet had been sitting there for months, heavy and stubborn, its drawers sealed with time. She had bought it at a small thrift shop on the edge of town, drawn to it without knowing why. An old postal sorting cabinet, the owner had said. Solid wood, too heavy for most people, too forgotten to be valuable. Maria had smiled when she bought it. Some things didn't need to be valuable to be important. Now she stared at the envelope on the floor. It was yellowed, thin, worn at the edges. Not trash, not new. Something old. Something that had been handled carefully once, by hands that mattered. She bent down slowly, knees protesting, and picked it up. The handwriting stopped her breath. Dear Santa. Her fingers tightened slightly around the paper. She turned the envelope over. There was a date written faintly in pencil, almost erased by time. December. 30 years ago. Maria swallowed. She didn't open it right away. She had worked for the Postal Service most of her life. She had seen thousands of letters pass through her hands. Love letters, apologies, confessions, letters that ended marriages, letters that saved them, letters that changed lives without ever knowing it. And there was one rule she had always believed in, even after retirement. Letters mattered. She sat down at the small kitchen table, the envelope resting between her hands. Outside, the afternoon light was fading, stretching long shadows across the walls. The house was quiet in the way only empty houses were. Not sad, just still, as if waiting. Carefully, she opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was uneven, childish, the kind of handwriting that tried very hard to be neat, as if effort alone could guarantee it would be read. She unfolded it slowly, and then she read. Dear Santa, this year I don't want toys. I know you're busy and lots of kids ask for big things. I don't need anything big. I just want my dad to come home for Christmas. My mom says he's working far away. She says he'll come back someday. I believe her. I just thought maybe you could help him come back sooner. I promise I'll be good. Thank you. Love. The name was there, written carefully at the bottom. Maria didn't read it out loud. She couldn't. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she simply stared at the paper, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. She had delivered letters like this once, letters full of hope, letters full of trust. And suddenly, all she could think was that this one had never arrived. Not to Santa. Not to anyone. It had sat behind a cabinet for 30 years, waiting. What Maria didn't know yet, what she couldn't possibly know in that moment, was that this letter would not stay in her hands for long. That finding it would pull two men, separated by silence and misunderstanding, back toward each other. But right then, all she felt was the weight of a promise broken by time. Maria pressed the letter flat against the table with trembling hands. Oh, she whispered. Oh, my dear. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes, letting the weight of it settle into her bones. Somewhere, a child had written this believing someone would listen. And no one ever did. That night, Maria didn't sleep. She told herself it wasn't her business. The past was the past. 30 years was a lifetime. Whatever had happened had already happened. But every time she closed her eyes, the words came back. I just want my dad to come home for Christmas. By morning, she knew she wouldn't be able to let it go. She made herself coffee, though she barely touched it, and placed the letter back inside the envelope. She sat at the table with an old notebook and began writing down what little information she had. A child's name, a date, an address that might not exist anymore. It wasn't much. but it was something. She started with the records she still remembered how to access. Old systems. Archived directories. The kind of places no one looked anymore because they assumed there was nothing left to find. Hours passed. She found nothing. No current address. No forwarding information. Just traces. Faded lines in forgotten databases that led nowhere. By midday, her hope began to thin. Maybe it's too late, she murmured. That was when she thought of her granddaughter, Emily. 16 years old, sharp, quick with technology, always glued to her phone, always skeptical of her grandmother's old-fashioned instincts. Maria hesitated before calling her. Emily answered on the third ring. "Hi, Grandma." "Emily," Maria said softly. "I need your help." There was a pause. "With what?" "With something important." Another pause. "Is everything okay?" Maria looked down at the envelope in front of her. "I found a letter," she said. "A very old one." Emily sighed gently, already half smiling through the phone. "Grandma, you collect old things." "This one is different," Maria said. "It was written to Santa, by a little boy, 30 years ago. That got Emily's attention." "Okay," she said slowly. And I think we should find him." There was silence on the line. "Grandma," Emily finally said, "you can't just... People move on. That was a long time ago." "I know," Maria replied. "But he didn't know. He never knew what happened." "How do you know that?" Maria closed her eyes. "Because letters like this don't get written twice." Emily exhaled. "I'll come over after school." When Emily arrived that afternoon, she read the letter herself. She didn't speak for a long time. "It's sad," she admitted. "But what if he doesn't want to be found?" Maria nodded. "Then we respect that." "And what if it hurts him more?" Maria looked at her granddaughter gently. "What hurts more than believing someone chose to leave you?" Emily didn't answer. They started with what Emily knew best. Public records, old addresses, forgotten digital trails. It was slow, frustrating work. Dead ends piled up quickly, until Emily froze. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I think I found him." The man they found wasn't a child anymore. He lived alone in a small apartment. His online presence was minimal. No holiday photos, no family gatherings, just work, long hours, empty weekends. Emily frowned at the screen. "He doesn't celebrate Christmas," she said. "No posts, nothing." Maria felt something settle heavily in her chest. A boy who waited. A man who stopped expecting. And somewhere, 30 years ago, a father who never came home. Not because he didn't want to, but because life had intervened in the cruelest way. Maria folded the letter carefully. "We can't stop now," she said. Emily looked at her grandmother, seeing her differently, not as an old woman clinging to the past, but as someone standing at the edge of something unfinished. "Okay," Emily said, "but if we do this, we do it right." That night, as the sun set and the house grew quiet again, Maria placed the letter beside her bed, and for the first time since finding it, she whispered, not to Santa, but to the silence itself. "Someone is listening now." The man's name was Daniel. That was the first thing Maria said out loud after Emily confirmed it, as if speaking his name would anchor him in reality instead of leaving him as just another line on a screen. Daniel Carter. 38 years old, living less than an hour away. Emily leaned back in her chair, laptop balanced on her knees, eyes scanning the same page again and again as if the details might rearrange themselves. "He doesn't have much online," she said. "No family photos, no holidays, just work. Mostly work." Maria nodded slowly. She had seen lives like that before, People who didn't leave traces because they didn't expect anyone to come looking. "What does he do?" Maria asked. "Logistics," Emily replied. "Warehouse management, long shifts, nights sometimes." Maria closed her eyes for a brief moment. Long shifts, long nights. She imagined a man who stayed busy on purpose. Someone who filled every hour so there would be no quiet moments where old questions could surface. Emily clicked through another page. He lost his mother about 8 years ago. Maria opened her eyes. Any mention of his father? Emily shook her head. Nothing. No obituary mention. No shared last name. It's like his dad disappeared from the record completely. Maria felt the familiar weight in her chest again, even though the letter wasn't in her hands. "Some people don't disappear," she said quietly. "They're just erased from the story." They didn't contact Daniel right away. Maria insisted on waiting. "If we interrupt his life without understanding it first," she said, "we might do more harm than good." Emily agreed, though she didn't fully understand why her grandmother felt so strongly about it. For several days they observed quietly. Nothing invasive, nothing cruel, just enough to understand the shape of Daniel's life. He left his apartment early every morning. He returned late. Sometimes he carried groceries for one. Sometimes he stopped at the same small diner on the corner, ordered the same meal, and sat alone in the same booth, staring at nothing in particular. Emily noticed something else. "He never checks his phone," she said one afternoon. "Not like everyone else." Maria watched a paused image on the screen. Daniel stepping out of his car, keys in hand, eyes fixed straight ahead. "He's used to not expecting messages," Maria said. That night Maria took the letter out again. She read it slowly, as if hearing it with new ears now that she knew the man behind it. "I just want my dad to come home for Christmas." She wondered how many Christmases Daniel had spent believing that wish had simply vanished into the air. How many times he had set the table in his mind for someone who never arrived. The next afternoon, Emily found Maria sitting at the kitchen table, letter open in front of her, eyes distant. "Grandma," she said gently, "you okay?" Maria nodded. "I keep thinking about what it's like to grow up believing someone chose not to love you." Emily sat down across from her. "My dad would never just leave me," she said instinctively. Maria reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "And that's a blessing you don't even realize yet." Emily swallowed and looked away. They made a decision. No letters, no messages. Not yet. There was still another part of the story missing. The father. Finding him took longer. Records went cold. Addresses led nowhere. Names almost matched, but didn't quite. Days passed. Emily was about to close her laptop one afternoon when she stopped suddenly. "Grandma," she said, "I think I found someone." The man lived in a small town 2 hours away. His name was Thomas Carter, 72 years old, former truck driver. Maria felt her breath catch. "Does it say anything about an accident?" she asked quietly. Emily scrolled. "Yes. Hospital records from 30 years ago. Severe crash. Long-term hospitalization." Maria closed her eyes. The pieces clicked together with a certainty that made her heart ache. They drove to see Thomas the following week. Maria insisted on going in person. "Some truths don't belong on screens," she said. Thomas lived in a modest house near the highway, chosen more for convenience than comfort. The kind of place someone picked when they didn't expect visitors. When he opened the door, he looked older than his age. Not weak, just worn, as if life had asked more from him than it should have. "Yes?" he asked cautiously. Maria introduced herself simply. "My name is Maria," she said. "I worked for the Postal Service for many years." Something in her voice made him step aside. "Please," he said, "Come in." The house was clean but sparse. On one wall hung a single framed photograph, a young boy smiling shyly, missing one front tooth. Maria stopped walking. "That's my son," Thomas said quietly. "Daniel." Maria turned slowly to face him. "He was 8, Thomas continued, "right before everything went wrong." They sat at the small kitchen table, mirroring the way Maria had sat when she first opened the letter. Thomas spoke carefully, choosing his words as if they were fragile. He had been on a long haul that December, a bad storm, a slick road, a crash that nearly killed him. "I woke up months later," he said. "Didn't even know it was spring." When he finally returned home, the house was empty. His wife had taken Daniel and moved away. She believed he had chosen work over them, chosen distance, chosen absence. "And by the time I could walk properly again," Thomas said, voice breaking, "they were gone." He tried to find them. Letters came back unopened. Phone numbers were disconnected. Addresses led to strangers. "I never stopped looking," he said. "I just ran out of places to search." Maria listened without interrupting. She reached into her purse, but she didn't take out the letter. Not yet. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, "if I told you there was a way to see your son again, would you want that?" Thomas didn't hesitate. "I'd walk through fire." Maria nodded. That night, back home, Emily stared at her grandmother with a mixture of fear and awe. "You're really doing this," she said. Maria folded the letter carefully. "No," she replied softly. "I'm finishing something that was left undone." They agreed on a plan, not a confrontation, not a phone call, not an explanation delivered too fast. Something gentler, something human. Maria volunteered at a community center every year, helping organize a Christmas dinner for people who had nowhere else to go. This year, she would make sure 2 invitations were sent, one to Daniel, one to Thomas. Neither would know about the other. Emily hesitated. What if it goes wrong? Maria looked at her granddaughter. What if it finally goes right? As Christmas Eve approached, Maria placed the letter on her bedside table. For the first time since finding it, she slept peacefully. Because somewhere, deep down, she knew. The story was moving again. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. There was no snow that year, only a sharp cold that made people pull their coats tighter and keep their heads down as they walked. The community center came alive slowly, one small detail at a time. Folding tables were arranged in long rows. Paper snowflakes were taped to the windows. Warm white lights were strung across the ceiling, uneven but welcoming. Maria stood near the entrance, watching it all take shape. She had done this every year for as long as she could remember. Christmas dinners for people who had nowhere else to go. People who said they were fine being alone, even when they weren't. But this year, her hands trembled slightly. Emily noticed. "You're nervous," she said softly, stepping closer. Maria smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "No," she replied. "I'm aware." They had sent the invitations days earlier. Simple cards, no explanations. Just a time, a place, and the promise of a warm meal. Daniel's response had been brief. "I can stop by for a bit." Thomas had answered by phone. "I'll be there early," he had said. "I don't like being late." Neither of them knew the truth, and Maria carried that knowledge carefully, like something fragile that could shatter if handled too roughly. People began to arrive, familiar faces, new ones. Laughter filled the room in small waves. Plates clinked. Someone turned on the music, soft, instrumental, just enough to fill the silence. Maria greeted everyone warmly, doing her best to seem calm. She hugged friends, handed out plates, exchanged polite smiles. But her eyes kept drifting to the door. Daniel arrived first. He stepped inside cautiously, coat still zipped, shoulders slightly hunched, as if he were already preparing to leave. He scanned the room with the detached focus of someone who didn't expect to belong. Emily spotted him immediately. "That's him," she whispered. Maria nodded. Daniel looked older than his age. Not in years, but in posture. In the way he moved like someone who had learned not to take up too much space. Maria approached him slowly. "Daniel?" she asked gently. He looked up, surprised. "Yes?" "I'm Maria. Thank you for coming." He nodded politely. "Of course." She handed him a plate and gestured toward the tables. "Please, make yourself comfortable." Daniel chose a seat near the edge of the room. He watched families laugh, children tug at sleeves, couples lean toward each other, sharing quiet jokes. He felt like a visitor in a place built for other people. He checked his watch. Just a little while, he told himself. Then he could leave. The door opened again. Thomas stepped inside, removing his hat carefully and holding it in both hands. He paused, eyes adjusting to the warmth and light. His gaze moved slowly across the room, and then it stopped. Daniel felt it before he saw it. That strange sensation, like being watched. He looked up. Time slowed. The man standing near the entrance stared at him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Something about his face felt familiar, not comforting, unsettling. Thomas took a step forward. "Daniel," he said softly. Daniel stood halfway from his chair, heart pounding. "Yes?" he replied, guarded. Thomas swallowed. His hands trembled. "It's me," he said. "It's your dad." The room seemed to disappear. The laughter, the music, the movement, all of it faded. Daniel stared at him, disbelief flooding his face. "My dad?" he repeated. You left." Thomas shook his head desperately. "No, I didn't. I swear I didn't." Maria watched from a distance, her hands clasped tightly together. She didn't step in. This moment didn't belong to her. Daniel's voice trembled. "You didn't come back." "I couldn't," Thomas said, tears forming in his eyes. I tried for years." Daniel's breathing quickened. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Thomas reached into his coat pocket with shaking hands and pulled out a worn photograph. "You were 8, he said. "This is the last picture I have of us together." Daniel stared at the photo. His knees gave way, and he sat down heavily. "I thought you chose work over us," he whispered. "Mom said—" Thomas's voice broke. "I had an accident. I was in a coma. By the time I woke up, you were gone." Silence wrapped around them. Daniel covered his face with his hands. "I waited," he said hoarsely. "I waited every Christmas." Maria stepped forward slowly. "Daniel," she said gently, "there's something you should see." She handed him the envelope. He recognized it instantly. His handwriting. His breath caught as he unfolded the paper. "I just want my dad to come home for Christmas." Daniel pressed the letter to his chest, sobbing openly. "I wrote this," he said. "I wrote this and I thought it didn't matter." Thomas dropped to his knees in front of him. "It mattered," he said. "It mattered more than anything." They held each other then, not carefully, not politely, but desperately, the kind of embrace that releases decades of grief all at once. The room grew quiet, people instinctively stepping back, understanding without being told. Emily wiped tears from her cheeks. After a long moment, Daniel pulled away. "There's someone else," he said quietly. He gestured toward a young boy standing near the dessert table, watching with wide, uncertain eyes. "This is my son." Thomas looked at the child as if the world had just expanded in front of him. "My grandson," he whispered. The boy smiled shyly. Thomas opened his arms, and the boy stepped into them. 3 generations stood together beneath the soft Christmas lights. Maria stepped back, tears streaming freely now. Emily slipped her hand into her grandmother's. "You did it," she whispered. Maria shook her head gently. "No," she said. "The letter did." Later that night, as chairs were stacked and the room slowly emptied, Maria sat alone for a moment. She took the letter from her purse and folded it carefully. This time, her hands were steady. Outside, the cold night waited. Inside, something had finally been made whole. Maria smiled softly. Some wishes take longer to reach their destination. But when they do, they arrive exactly where they're meant to.
So, that's the end of this story, but there are plenty of other great ones right here. Before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that little bell.